Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Tathagatassa bhikkhave samma sambuddhassa dve dhamma desana pariyayena bhavanti. Papam papakato passathati ayang patama dhamma desana. Papam papakato diswa tatta nibbindatha virajjatha vimucchathati ayang dutiya dhamma desanati. Dear friends in Dhamma, so actually today we are hoping to discuss about two types of sermons, two types of Dhamma teachings of the Buddha. So those are recorded in the Itivuttaka Pali as just I have mentioned. So Itivuttaka Pali comes in the Khuddaka Nikaya, the shorter discourses of the Buddha, and this is one of the very interesting sutta where Buddha concisely highlighted the two teachings. So the first teaching he says, Papam papakato passathati. So you got to see evil as evil. And the second teaching is called Papam papakato diswa tatta nibbindata virajjata vimucchathati. So that is the topic actually I have highlighted. So having seen evil as evil, you got to rid of it, be detached from it, and freed from it. So now we have a question. So that is, what are the evil? So these are different levels of evil we can recognize, and we can say fairly gross type of evils, or we can call them as bodily misconduct, verbal misconduct, and then even the mental misconduct. And most of those are quite familiar to us as Buddhists. And bodily misconduct like killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, so those are recognized as the gross type of bodily misconduct. And then there are verbal misconduct, that is lying, harsh speech, divisive speech, slandering, that type of verbal misconduct. And then we have the gross kind of mental misconduct, that is vicious or kind of unethical type of greed, and then the ill will, and then the misunderstanding, or what we call as the micchaditti, the wrong view. Now these typically recognized as the 10 types of unwholesome deeds, and they are fairly restrained to the morality. So we know that as Buddhists, even just now we observed precepts, 5 precepts right now. So that basically has reduced fair amount of possibility of making kind of very grievous or very heavy type of bodily misconduct and verbal misconduct. Now another interesting part is, now we all as human beings, so these bodily misconduct and verbal misconduct, actually we all can understand those are necessary for the well-being of the society, and it is not merely the Buddhist, as human beings, so it is necessary to maintain kind of an ethical, fairly cohesive kind of a society. So as a result of that, we all can agree, yes, it is true that we should not kill, we should not steal, we should not involve in the sexual misconduct, we should not lie, and we should not misuse or participate in the intoxicants, etc. So we can basically understand these things. So, and again Buddha highlights them as the gross kind of misconduct, gross kinds of defilements, olarika upakkilesa. So this is a term referred in the Pansuddhovaka Sutta, olarika upakkilesa. So those are the gross kind of upakkilesa, gross defilements. So when our mind get really afflicted based on these kind of defilements, and that indicates kind of a gravity that one can even get into the transgression of the precepts and get on to killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, taking intoxicants, involved in the divisive speech, harsh speech. So these are, we all can understand, fairly gross kind of misconduct, gross kind of misbehavior, or gross kind of defilements operating at that time. Now, one of the important thing is, even we all can understand these are misconducts or misdeeds, but still many people are involved with that. So even though we can understand, so these things have a greater consequences, but still many people are involved with that. So we can see the society, how much people are involved in killing, how much they are involved in various types of stealing, and even the sexual misconduct, and how much cheating and lying and all these falsehood. So you can see, even though we as sensible human beings who can understand the value of these ethical precepts, still not many are following. So one of the great teachings of the Buddha is therefore papam papakato passatati. So therefore Buddha highlights, you need to know that evil as evil. Nowadays we know that even in our country, majority being Buddhist, there's a fair amount of crime going on, fair amount of killing going on, fair amount of stealing going on. So likewise, although we are a kind of a Buddhist country, but still fair amount of unwholesome deeds are continuously carried on. So one of the interesting and the prominent teaching of the Buddha is Sabba Papa Sakarana. So don't do any unwholesome deed. So first of all, in that sense, we have to adhere to that teaching. So we as Buddhists, we need to understand these gross kinds of defilements, gross kinds of misdeeds. At the same time, we should avoid from that. So this not involved in the misdeeds is one of the important factor of the Buddha's teaching. We may talk with various philosophical things, but how about not doing the evil deeds, not involved in killing, not involved in, say, stealing, not involved in sexual misconduct, not involved in lying. I mean, these things are very basics in a way. So at least we should preserve, or we should adhere to these basic principles. So therefore the first teaching of the Buddha, papam papakato passathati. So you should know, okay, they are the evil deeds. So first of all, we need to understand what are the evil, and so I am just given a very gross kinds of evil, and at least we as human beings, expecting our own well-being and expecting everyone's well-being, so we need to adhere to that thing. Okay, I should avoid all these misdeeds. It doesn't mean I can immediately purify myself, but with respect of the Buddha, with the respect of the Dhamma, to the Sangha, to the precepts, so we should try our best to avoid all these misdeeds. And then we can get on to more subtle level. So that is where Dhamma actually help us. So Buddha didn't stop here. Even though we are adhere to precepts, even though we are observing precepts, still our minds are impure. So fair amount of defilements are again and again appearing in the mind. We get inflicted by these defilements, and again mind get corrupted or cluttered by these defilements. So even though we are protecting the sila, the morality, but the mind is still quite vulnerable for all these different kinds of defilements. So there should be another level of solution to purify the mind. So that is, one level is the samadhi sikkha, where one is trying to develop some amount of mindfulness or develop some amount of concentration. The mental development is involved, and you are trying to temporarily subside the defilements. If the mind is cluttered with anger, so as we have heard from last week, so if the mind is cluttered with anger, there may be different strategies, different methods to overcome that anger. If mind being overwhelmed by lust, there should be different ways to overcome that lust. Similarly, if the mind being afflicted by kind of envy, jealousy, that kind of things, okay, we can to some extent subside these defilements, but only for a short time. Say you are in a kind of a concentrated situation, you are in a samadhi, so to that period, okay, the mind is free from defilements. But still, once you come out of that, still you become quite vulnerable to again and again subjected to those different kinds of defilements. So then why are we talking about another solution, another level of solution? So it is quite obvious. So these defilements in that sense are constantly appearing. If we are not mindful, they constantly appearing in the mind. And again, there's a higher possibility we being carried away by the defilements. We can become a victim of the kind of a defilement. So then probably we can have a kind of a wonder from where these defilements have begin. So Buddha actually highlighted, so you can't find out a starting point from where the mind become defiled. Whether it is 1,000,000 years ago, billion years ago, whether this mind has defiled, so we can't say like that. It is very much like unconceivable, and it is very, very far away, and from those ancient times the mind has become defiled. As a result of that, we are keep on wandering in this samsara, and but the beautiful thing is still we have an opportunity, still we have a potential to free the mind, to make the mind undefiled, to make the mind pure. So as human beings, we have that great potential. So that is something, the good news. So Buddha emphasized these minds are constantly being subjected to various defilements, and it is happening from long time, very far away time, from eons. But still, as a result of the coming across of the teaching, there's a higher potential, higher possibility that we have an ability to purify the mind. Now then, that is the interesting part. How to purify the mind. So those are interesting, and that is where the Buddha highlights in mindfulness practice, where one have a possibility of purifying the mind. And various techniques, therefore, Buddha preach in order to purify the mind. Now, in order to purify the mind, we first have to understand, okay, there is a problem, there is a shortcoming, there is a kind of a defiled mind. So it's a kind of a humble acceptance. So we become honest, we become humble, and we are well grounded, and we understand, okay, there is something to fix. I have to find out a solution. There is something going wrong. And as we discussed even yesterday at Kalalgoda, so if we consider a little child, so say born few months ago, so probably comparatively there may be a kind of a less defiled mind to some extent. But there are underneath defilements operating, but comparatively we can say a kind of a very soft or very little bit of pure mind. But gradually, as we are growing up, unfortunately, due to various reasons, our mind become cluttered, our mind become engrossed with various defilements, time to time affected by various defilements. So ultimately, when we become an adult, it is not that we are purifying our mind, but unfortunately we have fully cluttered the mind. We have made our mind more defiled. We have made our mind more polluted, more cluttered, more tensed, more fixed. So in that sense, we have a kind of a problem then, because we are going through the education, we are doing various things, we are trying our best to be a good person, but still ultimately when we recognize, okay, when I am born to this society, when I am born to this world, okay, I had kind of a account of defilements, my opening balance, but unfortunately with time, so that opening balance has increased, so that the amount of defilements have increased. So then I have to fix it. So am I going to die with more defilements, a load of defilements? So am I going to do something before I die? So So then we as human beings, sensible human beings, we have a kind of a responsibility. Because I am the one ultimately going to suffer. Rather than simply looking at this short lifespan, so we have to see the big picture. As Buddha mentioned, for long time, this mind has defiled. So he, in a way, warned the monks. He telling this in the Gaddulabadda Sutta, Tasmatiha bhikkave, bhikkhuna, abhikkanang sakanchittang paccavekkhitabbang. So monks, you should frequently reflect. Digarattang idanchittang sankilitta, ragena dosena mohenati. For long time, this mind has defiled from lust, hatred and delusion. So you can see Buddha has requested us to be humble. Buddha has requested us to be recognize, okay, we are in a little bit of trouble. Because our minds have come for a long time with a load of defilements. Then on the other hand, so he gave a good message. So that is where we can have a kind of a path. There's a possibility to make it pure as well. Even though it has been defiled for a long time, but still there's a higher possibility, potential is still available to make it pure. Now, as I mentioned, one level is the calming down of the gross defilements by means of the morality, and then we can make use of certain other samatha practices like Buddha Anusati, like say loving kindness meditation, say Asubha meditation. So all these are different techniques, and even kind of other some blissful experiences. Maybe to some extent we can make the mind somewhat undefiled for a temporary period of time. But still there's a potential to again become defiled. So even though temporarily the mind is free from defilements, still once we remove that concentration, or the concentration becomes shallow, then again mind get defiled. Then there should be a kind of a more sensible solution. So that is where we start from the very basics. So we are trying to develop mindfulness and trying to avoid the compulsive thinking, maybe conceptual proliferation. Time to time, again and again, we are paying attention to our, say, foot, or paying attention to the breath, to maybe rising and falling, so etc. So it's a kind of a way. So rather than promoting compulsive thinking, rather than promoting conceptual proliferation, so now we are trying to break that cycle, that vicious thinking, and time to time ground ourselves. Time to time establish mindfulness. So as we are progressing, then we can say, okay, so this frequency of grounding ourselves become more and more improved, and as a result of that, for a considerable period of time, okay, I am maintaining my attention on a selected object. That object actually is an undefiled or less defiled kind of an object. It does not promote defilements. Instead, it promotes some other positive qualities like mindfulness, like wisdom, like faith, effort. So those are the kind of the positive aspects. Those are necessary to do this purification process. And so we are now sort of strengthening those factors. So again and again assume that we are involved in this practice. So again and again we are trying to strengthen those positive qualities in the mind. Now assume, now you are able to establish mindfulness. So you are able to practice for a considerable period of time. So you can establish mindfulness for a while now. You can maintain your attention, say for example on breathing, for considerable period of time. Say you are doing walking meditation, you are able to establish mindfulness for a long time. So that gives some confidence. Okay, during that time my mind is less defiled. I am able to do walking meditation for say half an hour. So during that time the mind is less defiled. I'm able to practice anapanasati for half an hour. Okay, during that time, the mind is less defiled. So we understand, okay, this is a kind of a practical approach, and during that practice, okay, I am capable of maintaining the mind less defiled. So it's a kind of a relief, because we thought that we have no escape, we have no solution. But now we feel little confident, okay, if I am maintaining mindfulness, okay, I know what's really going on. And therefore Buddha mentioned, Yani sotani lokasmin satite sang nivarana. Sotanang sangvaram brumi panyayete pitiyari. So there are so much of floods of defilements. So he mentions kind of like a flood, so powerful. So typically our minds being dragged away by the flood. But now we have a solution, so that is the kind of the mindfulness, where all these floods can be stopped for a while, can be brought to a standstill by applying the brakes of the mindfulness. So the moment that you establish mindfulness, so that momentum of that defilement flood can be stopped. But still that is not the complete solution. Then Buddha recommend the wisdom. Panyayete pitiyare. So you need to develop wisdom in order to completely uproot the defilements. So the mindfulness helps us to sort of highlight the defilements. Mindfulness is very much like a monitoring process. So it will tell us, it will indicate us, okay, now the mind is defiled. Now you are having kind of a lustful mind. Now you are having kind of an angry mind. Now there's a jealousy. Now there's an anger. Now there is lust. Now there is envy. Now there is conceit. So likewise the function of the mindfulness in that sense is a kind of an indicator that's constantly observing and then indicate, okay, now what is the state of the mind. Now even for that we need to, in a way, have to practically develop that. It may not happen overnight. It may not happen if we simply discard or neglect the practice. So the skill that the mindfulness provides us also depends on how much we are practicing. But the solution may have to start from the very basics, starting from the body, development of the body awareness, and then slowly expanding that to the level of maybe to the feelings. Okay, now you are capable of understanding some emotions, and now you are even capable of understanding that emotions are coming and available, and sometimes you being overwhelmed by emotions, and sometimes still you, even though you know that there's a certain defilement operating in the mind, you still can't stop yourself. It is so powerful, so strong, and it is overwhelming you, it is overpowering you. By the way, you know that, you are aware of that. So in order to find out a solution, we should know first, okay, there is a problem. There are certain shortcomings, there are still some faults. So first of all, we need to honestly, humbly admit, okay, there is something to fix. So that's why Buddha highlight here, papam papakato passatahati. You should see there is evil. You should see there are defilements. You should see that something is wrong. And once you see that, once you notice that, okay, now you are responsible to finding out a solution. So Buddhas merely indicate the path. Buddhas merely give us various tools. He may show the path, but we ourselves have to develop the path. We ourselves have to develop those skills within ourselves. So Buddha find out a solution for his problem, and he indicated, okay, I have found a solution. It worked well. I am purified now. Now you guys also have to practice. Then you too can purify yourself. And now suppose we are developing mindfulness, we are able to maintain our attention, and as a result of that, suppose now we are start practicing clear comprehension. We are adding the clear comprehension also to the mindfulness practice, and we are carefully observing different phenomena. It may be bodily phenomena, it may be feelings, it may be sensations, it may be emotions, it may be even thoughts. So likewise, now we are expanding the mindfulness practice. Now as a result of that, slowly we may understand, okay, now I have little breaks. Now I am not acting compulsively. I am not acting sort of more harsh manner. I have more little control to myself now. And certain defilements are still appearing, but I know about it. But I can recognize them. And the important part of the practice is that we are capable of detached from the experience and looking at it objectively. Say for example, when the anger is available, so we are, rather than telling, okay, I am angry, and we are going to arguments and getting to quarrels and say fights, now we are able to step back and watch, okay, there is anger, there is an angry thought, there is lust, there is envy, there is jealousy, there is conceit. So likewise, now this step back and watch a defilement as a defilement. It is no more a kind of my defilement, but it is a defilement. It is a kind of an impediment. It's a kind of an impurity. It's a kind of a condition. Currently the mind is subjected to a kind of a conditioning. Now this is a different way of looking at it. So the wisdom approach, therefore the purification process, help us to look at the defilement from a different angle now. Previously, very much like we are a little afraid of defilements, I want to get rid of defilements. So that was the kind of the attitude previously we might had. But now, slowly as we are developing mindfulness, as we are developing the possibility of looking at various say bodily sensations, various say feelings, now we are learning a different skill. So body is going through various processes, and I can look at them like an outsider. Body is going through various feelings, I can look at them as an outsider. So the mind is going through various pleasures and maybe a little despair and all these sorrows, but still I can step back and watch mindfully like an outsider. Now that skill being developed from the beginning, from Kayanupassana, and now we can use it even at the level of mental development. Now rather than being afraid of the defilement, now we are step back and watch the defilement. It is not my defilement. It is a defilement. It is not my anger. It is anger. It is not my lust. It is lust. It is not my envy. It is just envy. So likewise we are now detached from the process, and still we humbly admit, okay, currently this mind is going through this kind of a defilement. So Buddha very beautifully highlights this point in the Sandittika Sutta, where he mentioned this Dhamma is so immediate. If you are able to understand a defilement at that very moment, so that is the immediacy of this Dhamma. You are not trapped in the defilement. You are not being a slave to that defilement. You are not a victim of that defilement. Rather, you are capable of step back and watch that defilement, recognize that defilement. That is the Sandittika Dhamma. That is the quality of the Dhamma. That is the quality of the teaching of the Buddha, where you are capable of recognizing a defilement as a defilement. You are recognizing a mental state as a mental state. It is not mine, it is not me, it is not myself. It is a defilement. It is now you are looking at it objectively. Rather than claiming it as mine or being suffering from that or being stressed by that, rather you are capable of maintaining a kind of a distance, and you are able to detach from it and watch it as a defilement. Now, as we are continuing, time to time, now we are getting another refuge. We are getting another kind of a release, because as we are further and further continuing the practice, so this very observation is sort of generating fair amount of wisdom to the mind. So suppose that you are developing Anapanasati, or you are developing the Dhatu Manasikara, the elements meditation, or suppose you are practicing Vedananupassana, observing various feelings and even the thoughts. This very observation actually give you a kind of an understanding how they are behaving. It is not that you are borrowing the knowledge from the book, rather you are now depending on the direct experience. Time to time you are observing various bodily sensations. You are observing various, say, thoughts, feelings. Now, all of them are behaving in a certain manner, very common manner. They have the nature to arise and they have the nature to pass away. They have the nature to come and they have the nature to go. They simply appear and then disappear, coming and going. So these are kind of a common characteristic. Again and again, more and more you are looking at them. Now you become more and more detached from them. So this very understanding is capable of detaching the mind further and further. And ultimately everything like mixed up like a flux, and you feel, okay, no point of struggling with this, let it be. Because they have their own agenda. I have no control. They are constantly subjected to arising and passing away, constantly oppressed by this impermanent situation. And I have no control. I can't say they belong to me. I can't say they are mine. And I can't recognize with them. I can't identify with them. They behave their own way. So why I bother? Now you are looking at them in a different way, and slowly you become more and more detached. Now we can see, as Buddha even highlighted at the second part, tatta nibbindata virajjata vimucchathati. Now even that we can apply here. So as we are seeing them, even at the practice, different phenomena, maybe bodily phenomena, feelings, thoughts, etc. And slowly this detachment arises, disenchantment arises. And now we are capable of looking at them objectively more and more. And slowly mind become very calm, quiet. Time to time you experience complete absence of kind of a cluttered nature of the mind. So now you time to time experience kind of clarity of mind, undefiled state of mind. And as you are continuing, sometimes, maybe accidentally even, mind get completely released. Mind is not attached with anything, not grasping anything, not holding anything. And kind of a state of mind can arise. So that state of mind is very, in a way, unnoticeable. It may have happened only for a moment and it is not noticed. But as you are continuing, so this event may recur, may repeat. Now it happened for 2 moments, now it happened 5 moments, now it happened 10 moments. So likewise it is repeatedly happening now. Now slowly the yogi, the practitioner start noticing that. Okay, I am continuing the practice, I am continuing the observation. At a given moment, okay, mind let go of everything and it become completely detached, completely released, and you lose your orientation. And you are very much like experience a different domain. So this is something to notice. This is actually a kind of a breakthrough in Vipassana, where you are capable of not attached with anything in the world, not associating anything in the world. So in our practice, so if you are able to recognize such state, even though it is utterly boring, even though it is not entertaining any kind of I-ness, any personality view, or any kind of identification, but we need to notice that. We need to allow that process to happen. We need to allow that process to expand. And we have to give trust to the Buddha, and we need to appreciate that event. We need to appreciate that instance. And slowly, as we are familiarizing with this process, Now we are slowly stepping on to that area. Now we are finding out another stage of our practice where a completely undefiled state of mind now we are recognizing. It is a kind of a pure state of mind. Previously we couldn't even appreciate that, because what we typically appreciate, what we give more marks are to the levels, to the state of mind where I is highlighted, where my mind is highlighted, or where I-ness is highlighted. But this particular released event, there is no I. And you can't recognize a kind of a person. You can't recognize an individual. The typical conventional norms are no more there. So that's why it's utterly boring, or you can't recognize its value. So typical value system that you have in your mind are completely irrelevant to that kind of a state. So the mind is completely blank or kind of empty. So how are we going to give a typical value system? So that means, so typically we judge based on the kind of very mundane kind of a value judgment. But when the mind is released, so how are we going to apply that kind of a judgment, typical value system to such situation? So that is why we keep on missing this point. We keep on ignoring this point. And when we are able to recognize this place, we are recognize this mental state, and we understand, okay, there is something there. So Buddha has pointed it out. Buddha has highlighted that. Buddha asked us to value that. And interestingly, Buddha asked us to be in that. So there's a very interesting point in the Vitakka Sutta, again in the Itivuttaka Pali. So Buddha mentioned, Paviveka Ramo Bhikkave Viharata Paviveka Ratu. So Buddha mentioned, okay, you got to incline towards the restful state of the mind. So here, so Buddha is in a way kind of guiding us towards that restful state of the mind, release state of the mind. Paviveka Ramo Bhikkave Viharata Paviveka Ratu. So typically, as I mentioned before, our minds are quite agitated. It's constantly subjected to various ups and downs, and constantly in the different extremes, always kind of going through some impulsive behavior, always oscillating, constantly going to some pulsations. But when the mind is released, when the mind is not attached with anything, it is very much like you are grounded. You have come back home. You're completely released, completely neutralized. It is no more agitation, there is no stress. So that state of mind, and Buddha highlights, okay, you got to incline towards that state. Give some marks to that state. Give some value to that state. Even though you can't really appreciate it to 100%, but try to be little inclined towards that direction. So that's a kind of an advice that Buddha is giving. Paviveka Ramo Bhikkave Viharata Paviveka Rato. So what is the advantage? Advantage also Buddha highlights there. Tesango Bhikkave Tumhakam Paviveka Ramanang Viharatang Paviveka Ratanang. So when you are inclined towards that restful state of mind, when you are a little bit attached to that, you want to be in that, Eso vitakko bahulang samuda charissati. Later, you get a kind of a thought in your mind. So at that state, actually, there are no thoughts. You are simply being in a kind of an empty space. But as you are continuing that practice, later, you get a reflection to the mind. What is the reflection? What is the thought? King akusalang, king appahinam, king pajahamati. What is unwholesome? What is said the unwholesome? What are these unwholesome deeds? King appahinam. So what are still available unwholesome states in this mind? King pajahamati. So how am I going to remove it? So you can see, so mind has a kind of a potential. So if we are able to touch that pure state of mind, at least for a moment, at least for a temporary state, so it's kind of a generate kind of a possibility, kind of a momentum. So now mind is inclined towards that purity. So mind is now requesting such purity. It has tasted kind of a purity. It has tasted a complete detached state of mind, a released state of mind, a freed state of mind. Now it is inviting, it is asking you, why don't you purify me? Why can't you release me? Why are you sort of torturing me? Why can't you release me? Now the mind is asking. It is not that I am trying to sort of forcefully purify, but mind has now little tasted. Mind has tasted the freedom. And now mind is requesting, why don't you purify me? There's a possibility. Can you remember at that moment you are quite purified? So why can't you maintain that? During that time your mind is very relaxed, no tension, no defilements. So why can't you maintain that? So it's a kind of a request, kind of an inner yearning, inner request coming from the mind, please purify myself. So likewise, so Buddha in a way catalyzing the thing. Now as a result of that, now okay, we have kind of an inner urge to purify the mind. So the potential is available. Now you have seen the potential. You have touched the potential. It's a matter of expanding that potential. So that's why further Buddha encouraging that papam pasata papam papakato disva tatta nibbindata. So you got to, rather than entertain the defilement, you have to be detached from the defilement. You are discouraging the defilement. You are encouraging the undefiled state of mind. You are encouraging the pure state of mind. And be detached from the defilements, be detached from the unwholesome side, be detached from the conditioned state of the mind. And you are promoting the release state of the mind, vimucchathati. So you are, with the highlights, okay, you got to promote the freedom of the mind. Ayam dutiyadam desana. So this is the second type of the teaching of the Buddha. So therefore we can see, so Buddha as a universal teacher, so he purified himself first, and now he is sort of encouraging us to purify ourselves. And even before he delivered the Satipatthana Sutta, so he highlights that ekayano ayam bhikkhave maggo sattanang visuddhya. So the monks, there is a direct path for the purification. Soka pariddhavanam samatikkamai. In order to overcome all the sorrows and lamentation, dukkha domanassanam atthangamai, to overcome all different kinds of suffering, sorrows, and the despair. So there is a direct path. There is a kind of a strong path. So he, in a way, confidently tells that. He has a lot of confidence. Yes, I have done that. I am quite sure about it. This is an ancient path. It is not kind of a something that only unique to the Gautama Buddha. And he himself mentioned this is a very ancient path. And if you can remember the Arya Vansa Sutta as Sri Lankan Buddhists, so we all quite familiar with this Arya Vansa Sutta. So Buddha highlights it's coming as a kind of a noble lineage that we have to have Bhavanaramataya, Bhavanaratiya. So you are geared to develop the mind. You are inclined towards the development of the mind. And Pahanaramataya, Pahanaratiya. You are inclined towards the purification of the mind. Abandonment of the defilements, abandonment of the impurities. So it's an ancient practice. It is coming from the lineage, from the noble lineage, from many, many Buddhas, from many, many Pacceka Buddhas, from many, many Arahants. It's a noble lineage. So Buddha encouraged us to join with that lineage. And interestingly, and you can see how clever he is, he mentioned, Neva attung kanseti no parang vambeheti. Sohi tatta dakko, analaso, sampajano, patissato. Ayang uchati bhikkave bhikkhu, porane agganye ariyavanse tito. So Buddha mentioned, even though now you know, okay, I have to do it, I have time to time experienced that purity of the mind, undefiled state of the mind. So you found you are a little bit clever in that sense. You have worked hard, you achieved something. At least time to time I am capable of maintaining a pure state of mind. But Buddha highlights, Nevattu kanseti. So you are not extolling yourself. You are not looking down others even using that skill. You can see how beautifully that Buddha kind of giving us a solution. Because even this very skill, even this very solution can create kind of a conceit in our mind. Thinking, okay, I am the most clever person, I am the, say, the Vipassana, the best Vipassana yogi. All others are sort of ignorant. So it can create kind of a conceit in us. So Buddha even avoids that. Buddha mentioned, okay, don't do that. Neva tukkanseti no parang vambeti. Don't disparage others. Don't extol yourself. Sohi tatta dakko, and be skillful in the path. Be skillful in the development of the path. Sampajano, be always attentive, diligent. Patissato, be ever mindful. Because the defilements have no excuse. Don't expect defilements to happen or defilements to occur, defilements to appear while you are meditating. They may not appear because you are quite ready. You are diligent. So at that time defilements may not appear. But say when you are slack in your mindfulness, when you are simply traveling, when you are talking with others, when you are say traveling, or when you are engaged with various other activities, then a higher possibility, higher vulnerability is there for the defilements to arise. So they are basically merciless. So defilements don't care whether you are practicing only at that time I have to appear. There is no such agreement. So they may find an excuse and they simply infiltrate. They simply overwhelm your mind. They will catch yourself. So then when are we going to practice? Is it only at Kalalgoda? Is it only on our cushion? Is it only during our practice session? Is it the only time the defilement is going to appear? Then we need to understand, yes, these defilements are, always like intruders. They are always like trying to invade the mind. So I have to be quite diligent. I have to maintain kind of a wakefulness. I have to be on guard. I have to look after my mind. I should not allow these defilements to overwhelm the mind. Take the mind for granted. So you are now being more diligent. You are taking care of yourself. So the whole practice become kind of a life experience. So you are now trying to safeguard you. Purify as much as possible. Be diligent, because there is no mercy coming from the defilements. And as we are continuing, so slowly, probably, we are able to experience undefiled mind, pure mind, unattached mind, non-grasping mind for a more and more considerable period of time. So then probably slowly we can understand, okay, something is going on. The purification has started. It's a matter of allowing that process. Let the mind being continuously subjected to that process. I should not sort of hinder that process. Now the process has begun. So the Dhamma is operating in that mind. So the Dhammas are now operating in the mind. It is not that I am doing it. Rather, Dhammas are helping for the purification. It is not I am making it, is not my process. Now even that I making, mind making has to be stopped. We are not highlighting as a person now. We are not highlighting as a I now. Rather, we understand even that I making, mind making, highlighting as a person. So those are also very subtle defilements operating in the mind. So you can see So different levels of understanding, different levels of defilements we are talking. And slowly the purification process is going on. It is cutting off different levels of defilements. So as we are continuing, so different levels of defilements are keep on fading off, tapering off. And so Buddha mentioned, okay, the one may experience kind of calmness, relaxed state of mind, released state of mind quite often. So one day we would be able to completely purify our minds. So that the path is to continue the practice, and the encouragement is coming from the Buddha again and again. And so that's why he mentioned, okay, in this particular sutta, in this Desana Sutta, Tathagatasya Buddhasya Sabba Bhutanukampino Pariyaya Vachanam Passa Dvecha Dhamma Pakasita. For the compassionate one, the Tathagata, the compassionate one for all beings, there are two kinds of Dhamma teachings. Papakang Passata Tatta Me Etang Tatta Chapi Virajjata. So he highlights, so you got to see the defilements as defilements, unwholesome deeds as unwholesome deeds, and you got to detach from them. Tato viratta chitta se dukkha santang karissata. And by promoting that detached state of mind, by released mind, and now you would have a possibility, a potential to completely free from suffering. So with that note, I like to conclude today's Dhamma sermon. Thank you very much for attentive listening.
Much merit, Bhante. Thank you very much for that brilliant exposition of how to do it with mindfulness and the different steps, the obstacles and the pitfalls, and yet the inherent nature of the mind, which will lean towards helping at the end, I believe, to an extent. But the defilements are there, and the Buddha's encouragement. Thank you very much, because by changing that vantage point where we were and taking a step back, how helpful it is that cardinal thing, and of course to go on and on. Much merit, Bhante. We had 60 persons listening, so I'm sure there are many questions, many comments. We are very fortunate, Bhante, to have heard this given so simply and in such practical terms. Any questions? Can I open the floor to questions? Please use the normal Zoom etiquette and raise the hand or and ask the question, or put it on the chat, please. Any comments or questions? I can't see everyone. I don't know whether we can do that, Sanap. There may be many venerables. Sanap, you have raised your hand. You have a question. Yes.
Thank you, Venerable Sir. Very well delivered. Two questions, Venerable Sir, for further clarifications. That you have very nicely mentioned that it is highly discussed in the Western context, saying that how to see the big picture. But I was not able to quite catch the sutta that you mentioned. I would appreciate if you kindly give a brief description of that sutta.
Yeah.
And the second one, Venerable Sir, can I go to the second question as well?
Yeah, actually the sutta is available in the Itivuttaka. It is called Desana Sutta. Dhamma teachings. Desana Sutta, it comes under the Dukkha Nipata, the second two-factor teaching, because Itivuttaka has one-factor teachings, two-factor teachings likewise. So this is coming under the Dukkha Nipata, the two-factored or two-fold kind of teachings. Name is Desana Sutta.
Venerable Sir.
The name of the sutta is Desana Sutta. I can write it on the chat if you want.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And Venerable Sir, that there's another point that actually I was very happy to hear that you just touched the sutta called Sandittika Sutta.
Yeah.
You elaborated the fact that are capable of understanding the arising of the defilement at its very inception, that you have a much control to stop it reaching its full potential. Venerable, would you like to explain it further? Because now understanding at the very beginning how it leads to avoid it moving into its fullest potential.
Yeah. So that's why, Dr. Sanath, basically, so when we have, say, weak mindfulness, so we can't notice the defilement. So basically, we only notice them when the thing has happened. So we are too late. We are completely unmindful, and the kind of emotion has arisen in the mind, and it has completely taken the full control, and then we are impulsively reacting to that, and then we are too late, and we are getting into trouble, arguments, conflicts, quarrels, etc. And later we regret what has happened. So that is completely unmindful state of the situation. Now, as we are continuing the practice, now this process starts changing. So where you understand when the mind is boiling with anger, you understand, okay, this kind of anger is available, but unfortunately still I can't stop myself. Say for example, it is very, very much like a vehicle. Suppose while you are driving, you fall asleep, and unfortunately now the vehicle has cut to a side and it is getting closer to the wall, and only after hitting the wall you wake up, and then it is too late. But another situation is there, okay, now the vehicle is cutting to a particular direction and is now getting almost closer to hit the wall. At that moment you are wake up, but you can't stop because the momentum is again very, very strong. It's completely go and crash. But at least you waked up before it is before it crash. So that is something better, by the way. At least you can tighten your seat belt. So the other thing is, now say as you are continuing the practice, now there is another situation, okay, before it come to the peak, okay, you recognize. So anger is there, okay, now it is developing and you recognize. So then you have a better opportunity to at least control yourself, because you know it hasn't come to the very reactive level. It hasn't come to the transgression level. And to some extent you can manage, very much like, say you are waking up before it hits the wall, and now it, by the way, it's turned to the wrong direction, but you have ample time to cut it to the proper direction. That's very much like that. Now there's another situation, okay, the anger is arising and it is only at the very early stage. It hasn't grown to a very higher level, but early stage. Then easily you can manage. Very much like, say, you are driving the vehicle and almost it is cutting and you are almost falling asleep, but immediately you wake up. So you know, I mean, you have ample time to somehow overcome the situation, because it hasn't come to a very, it hasn't cut to a long, very much to a wrong direction too much. And the other part is, so whenever the moment the mind goes off track, whenever the mind goes to anger, even a slightest thought of anger, maybe a little bit of uneasiness, little bit of little frustration, little unliking type of a feeling, little uneasy kind of a feeling, uncomfortable feeling. So that is those are the very symptoms of the anger. It hasn't developed to the level of the emotion. It's a kind of a feeling now. So early symptoms are there. Now you are even recognizing that. And that indicates basically, so you have to be diligent. You have to be awake. So while driving, you can't go to sleep. so while driving, so no excuse. You have to maintain your wakefulness. So that is where, so the slightest moment the vehicle, say, kind of collapse into a pit, or all of a sudden someone may cut off or something like that. So you have to be quite diligent. So likewise, so as we are continuing the practice, so even the slightest misbehavior or kind of slightest appearance of a defilement, one can notice. then you are in good shape, because you can manage it. You know already. You are kind of a skillful driver now. You can manage yourself. You know how to handle the situation, and therefore, so understanding the defilements at their early stage happens based on the practice. So it may not happen immediately, but as we continue our practice, so it become more and more easy to handle, because even the very mindfulness practice, simply once the moment you are aware of a particular defilement, it starts disappearing. You don't need to practice loving kindness, or you don't need to practice asubha bhavana. Rather, the very understanding, okay, now there is lust in the mind, now there is anger in the mind. So that very understanding is enough to overcome that defilement, because the mindfulness has very much like taken the whole thing under control.
Thank you, Venerable Bhante. I think I was planning to ask the third question also. You, at the later part, you have answered that question as very well, because these questions I'm asking because this comes from my practice. Right. Because we tend to divide so many thoughts, wholesome and unwholesome. But what I feel understood from your last point, Venerable Sir, is that it is irrelevant whether the thoughts are wholesome or unwholesome. As far as you are mindful, you can drive your thinking process the way you want to do, or in the mindful way. Thank you, Venerable Sir.
Yeah, correct. Yes. So very much like we are, as I mentioned, we are taking the whole thing under control. So Buddha mentioned it as a kind of vitakka vasita. So you are the thinking process going under your scrutiny. So you know exactly what his mind is involved with. You know exactly what his mind is thinking. If it is necessary, you can think. If it is necessary, you can stop thinking.
Thank you very much, Venerable Bhante. Everything is right.
Yeah.
Mr. Don.
Yes, Don, you have a question.
You are on mute, Mr. Don. Please unmute yourself.
Thank you, Venerable Sir, for that presentation. I speak here particularly also in my work as a Buddhist counselor and a certified mindfulness MBSR practitioner. I deal with, in my work, with individuals involving conditioned minds, because minds can be deliberately conditioned. In my work in Africa, in north, south, east, west, and center, I've come across particularly child soldiers who get given guns at 11 years old, kidnapped, taken by either armies, armed forces, kidnapped by armed gangs, given guns, and trained or expected to kill. I've had dealings with them. Also, I have worked very closely with combatants in the Horn of Africa, in Eritrea, in Ethiopia, and so on, where I've dealt with those who have committed torture, murder, rape, and also those who have suffered from torture and so on. So the mind could be conditioned. Evil also to some extent is in the eye of the beholder. Evil can also be conditioned. And I would like to get your mind on this. there is a discourse between Mara and the Buddha. And the Buddha is in a state of extreme austerity. His flesh begins to wither away, but he says, whilst his flesh begins to wither away, he seems to get insight, although he is doing harm to the body. And Mara is quoted as saying, Jiva bo, jivitang seyo. Jivam punyani kahasi. Live, sir, he says to the Buddha. Life is better. Living, you can make merit. And this is a sort of person who is supposed to be a symbol of negative thinking. I would like to get your thoughts on this.
Yeah, actually, that point that in the Padhana Sutta, I like to highlight, comment on that first. So basically, in the Padhana Sutta, Buddha is now striving to become the Buddha. So he has no concern about continuing the life or even continuing the samsara, and he already has accumulated so much of merit. So he is no more interested of even making new merit. So you know that there is a...
But that is not mentioned in the sutta.
Yeah, I mean, the point we need to understand is that now what Mara highlights is, don't do this. I mean, you may die, you better live. You better live and do more merits. So that's the kind of a invitation that he is doing. But on the other hand, what he is telling is, you better give up your striving. You are not going to win. You are not going to win. You better now give up your striving. Rather, you better now give up your striving and start eating and all do other typical activities.
No, but he says in the sutta very clearly, give up your austerity and live in order to make good merit.
Exactly. That's what I am telling.
Good merit.
Yeah, that's what I am telling. So one may come to a situation. So even in the even in the Sammaditthi, say Sammaditthi has two parts. So one part is accumulating merit, and you are continuing with kind of asavas, taints, and you are being a person, you are accumulating more merit. That is one aspect that is also admitted to some extent. And then there's another part in the Sammaditthi. So that is called the supramundane type of Sammaditthi. So where you are not allowing the mind to be tainted. So you are not promoting any self-view. So that is a kind of a situation. You are not making a self and not being an individual, and you are not promoting as identification, and you are not promoting doing a merit, being a person. But you may continue as doing proper things, but not in the vision of accumulating merit. Now, in the Padhana Sutta, what Mara suggesting is, now Buddha is doing a kind of a real struggle there. Now he is going through the whole striving, and Mara is suggesting you better give up all these austere practices and you better do the merit and you continue your life. But Buddha there already have enough merit. There is no need of further merit for him.
But how is it that he is put himself into a state like this, where he is in extreme austerity? And I would like to just point out that in the spirit of safeguarding, I would not like to have anyone present here to practice that kind of thing. But he has put himself into a near-death situation as a result of not having any food to eat.
Yeah. Basically, it is not that Mara wants to protect or safeguard the Buddha. It is not that in favor of Buddha that Mara is suggesting that. Rather, Mara wants to sort of tempt the Buddha to give up striving. Actually, later Buddha understood as a bodhisattva, so this is not the path and that is his own realization. Then he go up and get into the proper path, to the middle path. So that's a different story. But what Mara wants to do is to give up his practice and give up his endurance, give up his sort of endeavor, and he wants to put him back to the accumulation of merit. So
that's a very important point, sir.
Yeah.
Think, so he says, King Padanena Kahasi. So what will striving do for you?
Yeah.
That's
So
an
he's
interesting
discouraging. Basically, Mara is discouraging the Buddha. You can't do it and just give it up. So kind of a discouraging comment that he is making, not kind of an encouragement and not kind of a that because of affection towards the Buddha that he wants to protect the Buddha. Rather, he simply want to avoid that Buddha to continue the practice and continue striving, so that he wants to stop, and so that the Buddha simply stop in between and he simply give it up. So later actually Buddha mentioned there is no point of accumulating merit for me. I have enough merits. So I have enough accumulated merits, and it is not my situation as to give up all this and continue my path just by accumulating more and more merits. Then I will have a more comfortable life in the samsara.
But why is it that a person, if a person has accumulated quite a large amount of merit and comes from a lineage of the Buddhas, why is it that a person has to go into try out extreme austerity and extreme practices in order to attain enlightenment?
Yeah, that's the thing.
Because of past karma.
Yeah, one thing is
bad karma.
Yeah, one thing is that past bad karma. The other thing is the the accepted norm of that culture. So there is the kind of cultural conditioning that people only believed only through the striving, only through say torturing or what you call as the austere practices that one can attain enlightenment. So that is the accepted norm of the culture, and Buddha also want to practice that, and that is the only way that they were being known. So Buddha also was trying that, and later he understood, I have come to the extreme level, there is no more, there is no further I can continue. Whatever the extreme torturing or extreme kind of say Attakilamatanu yoga that one has to practice, I have done that. This is the maximum that one can go. But I couldn't achieve anything. So now he is turning to a different path. So he already went through the Kamasukallikana yoga, the indulgence of the sense pleasures. Now he did to the maximum level of the self-mortification, and he understood both things are not going to work. Let me find out my own path. So all the traditional accepted methods he has tried, has gone to the max of them. Now he want to find out his own path. So now he is taking the middle path. Yeah.
Thank you. I think I'll stop there because maybe there would be a lot of others who want to ask questions.
Right.
May I read one from chat before we? There's a hand raised, but what's on the chat? I don't know, Bhante, whether you can see it. It's fairly long. Several years, and Upasika was trying to support monastics, but some of her so-called help was harmful, impending good solutions. Now she can see her mistakes and worries about the karmic consequences. Then this person who is asking says, I answered that over those years, when she fed wrong views and bad habits, but luckily now she gained insight. I said, I'm not sure, but maybe there won't be big drawbacks in future, as she had no bad intention, and it was not killing or stealing, though wrong speech was part of it. What do you say, respected Bhante?
I mean, one point is that intention. So if there is no intention to harm, intention to say kind of insult or something like that, then definitely, I mean, we can't say it has a kind of a karmic consequence, because intention is one important thing of the karma.
I hope that answers that. person has only written on chat. We have 2 more hands raised. We have only about a minute, so please make it very brief. Samantha Jayatilaka first, then Dilsiri. And we will stop after that and do the Anumodana. Samantha?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Manori. Thank you, Bhante, for that valuable guidance on dealing with defilements. That really, I learned a lot today. So basically, just to clarify my understanding, I'll just be quick. So Bhante was explaining to observe the defilement by detaching oneself and from the defilement and just be the observer, and also to have a direct experience of the defilement, to see the arising and the passing away. So then that will show the mind that whatever the defilement, it doesn't stay, it'll pass away. So does that mean that one has to be with the defilement? Like say if the anger arises, one just observes, detach the anger, and then arising, stay with the anger, and then see the passing away. I mean, would it be important to see the passing, the ending away of the anger, so the mind is conditioned to see that passing away? That's firstly. And then secondly, the Bhante said that once you keep on doing that and then repeatedly, the mind will incline towards the purification, to become purified. And then Bhante mentioned something about then you might feel strange, I presume.
No, actually, one moment. So actually, I need to correct. I need to correct. It is not really that I highlighted to see the rising and passing away of the defilement. Rather, we do the Satipatthana practice starting from the Kayanupassana, Vedananupassana. So those are not really to the level of defilements. Rather, they are, say, the bodily phenomena, say, bodily feelings, say, even the mental feelings, the pleasure, pain. So those kind of things. So those are the areas that first we work. So there are various bodily sensations going on, and we investigate how they are arising, how they are passing away. So that helps to build up the kind of the wisdom. And when you are looking, when you are step on to the Chittanupassana, so where you are looking at merely even thoughts. It hasn't grown to the level of a particular defilement, and you are capable of understanding them as kind of distracting thoughts. Now, thoughts also have the nature to come and go, and likewise we are developing this understanding, and that helps to release the mind, that helps to detach the mind, that helps to step onto a state of non-grasping. Now, what Buddha highlights is that promote that non-grasping state of mind, detached state of mind, the restful state of mind. And as you are being there, you are trying to familiarize that state. Then there's a question coming inside. So what are the situations which are impure, sort of making the mind impure? Why can't I maintain this purity? Why can't I maintain this detached state of mind? So what are the reasons? Again and again, this is stepping on to the defiled state of mind. So then you have a kind of a refuge. So I mean, it is not merely that looking at, I mean, confronting the defilement is one approach, yes. On the other hand, once it is available, if necessary, you can have an alternative path, that is to switch into that emptiness, and you are cultivating the emptiness, detached state of mind, unattached state of the mind. So that is another alternative path also available. It is not always that we have to sort of have kind of a confrontation with the defilement, and always have to sort of be with the anger and see each and every change of the anger and wait till it pass away. So that is also possible, true. But on the other hand, you have another alternative approach. So that is what I mean, sometimes in the Goenka tradition they do. So rather than immediately looking at the defilement, so they see the sensations available in the body. What are the other sort of supporting conditions available in the body. So that is another approach. But here what I want to highlight is, now there are arising of the defilements, but if you are familiar with the unattached state of the mind, so they may not come to a very higher level. Rather, you can easily notice at their early stages, and they are merely thoughts at that level. They have the potential to sort of become a strong defilement, but now they are merely a thought, very early stage.
Thank you, Bhante. So would that eventually lead to a upekkha state of mind?
Sorry, can you repeat?
Would that eventually, are we trying to achieve a upekkha, equanimous state of mind eventually?
Exactly. We are promoting that equanimous state of mind, unattached state of mind, and that very state of mind actually promote the non-proliferating state of mind. You know, the defilements are promoted only if we are feeding them.
Yeah. So if you're seeing the arising of it, how do you see that it passing away?
No, it has their nature to pass away. So we are the ones keeping them by feeding them. The moment you get detached, so who is going to feed them? They themselves don't have the energy to continue for a long time unless we feed them.
Right. So one has to observe that, basically.
Yeah, I mean, observation means that we are not feeding that.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Lovely. Yeah.
So
thank you, Bhante. That's really clarified. Thank you.
I think we are taking Bhante's very precious time also. Dilsiri, make it very short because our time has lapsed. And we have go on, Dilsiri, if you are there.
I'm here, but I think with a short time, I will just not ask the question because I
very
don't
quickly.
Okay. So I'll just take one of the things I wanted to ask.
Yes.
Okay. So I just want to thank Bhante at least one or two things for this very a talk that really gave us a lot of hope, because we tend to forget that the Buddha in all his teachings for so many years and so many 84,000 suttas or whatever, we tend to forget that actually basically he taught about that there's suffering or dukkha and how to get freedom from it. So we tend to get caught into all this the laukika samadhi and collective merit, and most of us, whenever in Sri Lanka, that's all I did. I had to come all the way here 28 years ago to England to open my mind to see the Western monastics only dealing with the mind, which also is not the only thing. So I just want to thank you for that, because that's what you concentrate, and the fact that the Dhamma was Sandhitika, the immediacy of it, because we always know all the things that is timeless and Vipassana and open icon and things, but we forget that when you that actually you can come to that stage where you can immediately see it with Sati Sampadana. So thank you very much for that. And from that comes my first question, which is about you mentioned about Dhatu Manasikara as one method. But recently I have been listening where you can use Indriya Bhavana and Indriya Sangvara, where the Bhavana is for Pratajnana people and the Sangvara for the Sekas. But of course, once you become Arahant, you don't have to, because you're in Sati Sampadana and it's immediate. I would just like to ask you what you think about that as a method for changing your thoughts. Thank you, Bhante.
Yeah, actually that is another interesting question, by the way. So, I mean, different approaches are there. So, in the Indriya Bhavana Sutta, what Buddha highlights is, different methods are there. So, you can directly recognize when the mind becomes cluttered, when the mind becomes burdened with something, but still you have another alternative, that is again to switch back to that released state of mind, unattached state of mind. So, as I just highlighted to the previous question, so once you are capable of understanding that equanimous state of mind that is being appreciated, and your mind being little inclined towards that state, and once the mind get defiled and cluttered and little burdened, that also you understand, and you are simply switching yourself towards that unattached state of mind. So it's a kind of a alternative available right now, kind of a refuge is available right now, and that is being promoted. And the other part is Other part is for the seeker with the highlights. I mean, you don't even need to do a lot of practices because you already are very much familiar with the situation. But unfortunately, mind again go and sort of get defiled, again go and attach, again go and grasp. But we are not recommending that. You are a little bit ashamed of that. So you have that kind of a feeling that I am being ashamed of that process. So that very shamefulness, that very not approving that process. So that attitude itself is enough for a seeker to release the mind. That Buddha highlights that attiyati harayati jigucchati. So basically means that so you have an inclination to maintain the mind quite pure, but unfortunately this fellow go and again attach. But now you are not approving it, you are not appreciating that, you are not recommending that, you are being shameful about it. So that very attitude helps the mind to return back to the kind of an unattached state of mind.
Thank you, Bhante. And just a one-word answer. In the 4 bases of our success, Itthipada, we talk of the last one, which is the Vimamsa. And in some books, like in short little notebooks, they say it's discrimination. But then we have another word, Paccavivekana or something, which is like when you reflect and see what has worked and what hasn't. What is the difference, Bhante, between those words?
Vimamsa typically means kind of an investigation. So it is more into the wisdom part. So you are reflecting what is the proper method, what is the proper thing to do. It's more into the reflection to understanding the investigation. So the investigation part would be I feel it is more appropriate.
Right. And Paccavivekana, when you say?
Paccavivekana means kind of a reflection, but Paccavekitabbang. So you look back, very much like you look back the situation, you reflect about it. Now you reflect about a particular situation and you investigate on something, has a little different, little bit of change, a little change of nuances. So investigate means even the present moment phenomena you can investigate. So that is one approach. But when you reflect back, so that is the Paccavekana.
So they're very similar, isn't it, Bhante?
Seems a little difference also is available.
Right. Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Much merit, Bhante. We have taken a lot of Bhante's time, but I think we have, hopefully we have benefited. It was a very, very informative and very, very well presented practical session of Dhamma. Bhante, shall we do the Anumodana also briefly, because I know Bhante's time is very precious and wanted elsewhere as well.
Okay, so we have gathered here and we spent fair amount of time discussing as well as listening to Dhamma. So all the merits that we have accumulated, let's share with all the past relatives and with the celestial beings and whoever in need of merits. Ettavatacha amhehi sambatang punya sampadang sabbe deva anumodantu sabba sampatti siddhya. Ettavatacha amhehi sambatang punya sampadang sabbe bhuta anumodantu sabba sampatti siddhya. Ettavatacha amhehi sambatang punya sampadang sabbe satta anumodantu sabba sampatti siddhya. Akasatta ca bummatta devanaga mahiddika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakkantu sasanang. Akasatta ca bummatta devanaga mahiddika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakkantu desanang. Akasatta ca bummatta devanaga mahiddika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakkantu mamparang. Idang wo nyatinang hotu sukita hontu nyatayo. Idang wo nyatinang hotu sukita hontu nyatayo. Idang wo nyatinang hotu sukita hontu nyatayo. Imina punya kammena mame bala samagamo satang samagamo hotu yava nibbana pattiya. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.